There comes a moment in your journey where silence becomes your strength and discretion becomes your shield. In a world where noise is currency and attention is a drug, it's tempting to broadcast every move, every thought, every pain. But let me tell you something, care enough. What you reveal too soon can be used against you before it's fully formed. Some of us are bleeding publicly while healing privately. Well, we're telling our business to people who have no business knowing our battles. Care enough. And then we wonder why the warfare intensifies. It's because we handed the enemy the battle plan. Oversharing isn't vulnerability. It's emotional leakage without discernment. Care enough. It's giving too much of yourself to people who haven't earned the right to access your depths. Not everyone deserves front row seats to your process. Some were only meant to pass by the trailer, not binge watch your whole life story. You've got to learn the art of internal processing. Just because you feel it doesn't mean you have to say it. Just because you know it doesn't mean you have to show it. Silence is not weakness, it's strategy. Observation is not passivity, it's preparation. When you learn to be silent and care enough, you become more sensitive to what's not being said. You begin to see motives, patterns, and intentions that words would have masked. Silence allows the room to speak to you before you speak to the room. God often does most sacred work in silence. The womb is quiet, the cocoon is silent. The soil doesn't speak. But something powerful is happening in all three. You're being transformed in silence, not for public display, but for divine destiny. So be quiet and let God finish writing your sentence before you read it aloud. Observe, discern, protect your peace. Master the pause before the post. Wait before the confession, and let your fruit speak louder than your feed. In an age of instant gratification and digital validation, care enough. The line between authenticity and vulnerability has been blurred. We have been conditioned to believe that the louder we cry, the faster help will come. That the more we reveal, the more people will relate. And while there is a time and place for healthy vulnerability, many are confusing the sacred act of healing with the reckless act of oversharing. Oversharing is not the same thing as healing. In fact, in many cases, care enough, it is the opposite of healing. It is a manifestation of pain crying out for attention, affirmation, or even rescue without the foundation of safety or discernment. Healing is intentional, it is structured, sacred, and often deeply private. Oversharing, on the other hand, care enough, is impulsive. It is giving away the contents of your soul without checking who's listening, what their intentions are, care enough, or whether the space is even worthy of your truth. There is a difference between transparent and being unguarded. Transparency says, I've processed this and I'm sharing it for a purpose. Unguardedness says, I'm bleeding in public because I don't know where else to go. And the danger with the latter is that you end up exposing wounds that are still open to people who aren't qualified to care for them. You invite critique, commentary, and sometimes condemnation into spaces that should have been protected. When you overshare, you surrender your power, not in a healthy surrender to God kind of way, but in a careless, expose myself for temporary relief kind of way. And often, care enough, you do so with people who don't have the spiritual maturity, emotional intelligence, or even the compassion to steward your pain well. It feels good in the moment, like releasing pressure from a boiling pot. But what you don't see is the long-term consequence of handing sacred of yourself to unsafe hands. Care enough. Some people will use what you share as entertainment. Others will weaponize it against you in a future conflict. And then there are those who pretend to care while secretly storing up your vulnerability as ammunition. That is why healing must begin in sacred spaces, with God, with trusted mentors enough, with licensed professionals, with spiritually safe friends, not in comment sections, public rants, or impulse conversations. Care enough, and let's be honest, some of us overshare because we crave validation. We're hoping someone will say, me too, or you're so strong, or I can't believe you went through that. And while it's human to want connection, care enough. That connection must be rooted in truth, not trauma. Oversharing doesn't guarantee support. Sometimes it invites scrutiny. Sometimes it invites shame. care enough. And more often than not, it keeps you stuck in the same cycle of pain because you've talked about it more than you've actually dealt with it. Care enough. You do not allow everyone access to your inner world. Healing is not a performance. It's not content. It's not a storyline for others to consume or critique. Care enough. Healing is holy. It's sacred. It's delicate, and it takes time. To share prematurely is to risk the integrity of your process. Care enough. Think about a seed underground. If you dig it up every day to show others its progress, it will never grow. Care enough. The same is true for the parts of you that are still becoming. Oversharing can also be a trauma response. When you've been silenced, rejected, care enough, or ignored in your past, you may overcompensate by telling too much in your present. You may believe that the more you tell enough, the more someone will finally see you, understand you, or stay with you. But understand this, those who are truly meant to walk with, you don't need a full breakdown of your pain in one sitting. They will honor your pace. They will respect your silence. They will see you even when you say very little. Sometimes healing requires you to pull back, to sit in silence, to write it in your journal before you post it online, to take it to God before you take it to people, to cry in your car and pray in your closet, rather than collapse in public, not because vulnerability is wrong, but because wisdom knows when to speak and when to stay quiet. Care enough. Not every emotion be announced. Not every wound needs to be displayed. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let God be your confidant and let time be your revealer. Care enough. The right people will experience the healed version of you when they meet you, not the bleeding version. And that's a gift. That's the reward of doing the hard work in private. That's the fruit of quiet, hidden, sacred restoration. And when you finally do speak, you speak from overflow, not from desperation. You share from stability, not from fragility. You reveal out of wisdom, not of reaction. So if you find yourself constantly needing to share every detail of your life, stop and ask, what part of me is craving attention that only healing can provide? What void am I trying to fill by speaking when I should be still? What truth am I trying to fast forward before it has matured in me? Protect your process. Guard your healing. Be selective with your sharing. Every part of your journey does not need an audience. Some things are meant to be prayed through, not posted. Care enough. Some seasons are for developing, not declaring. And some wounds are meant to be covered, not to hide in shame, but to shield them as they close. Care enough. Because when you heal properly, you won't feel the need to overshare. Your peace will speak for you. Your presence will announce your growth. Care enough. Your silence will echo with strength. We live in a loud world, a world that praises quick replies, loud opinions, constant updates. Care enough. And the ever-churning wheel of reaction. Silence in this age is often misunderstood. It is mislabeled as weakness, passivity, or even insecurity. But what the world fails to understand is that silence, when chosen with intention, is one of the most powerful strategies you can carry. Care enough. Silence is not about saying nothing because you have nothing to say. It's about saying nothing because you understand the value of timing. There's a difference between being silenced and choosing silence. One is bondage, the other is mastery. You see immature minds speak quickly. Insecure spirits feel the need to constantly explain. Wounded souls overshare in hopes that someone will validate their pain. But the spiritually mature, the emotionally disciplined, the ones who have spent time in the quiet place with God, they know that silence is a weapon, a shield, and a posture of trust. There is power in not reacting. There is power in not clapping back. There is power in not posting every thought, responding to every accusation, or defending yourself every time someone misunderstands you, because not every battle is yours to fight. Not every conversation deserves your energy, and not every comment deserves a reply. Sometimes the greatest clapback is no clapback at all. Sometimes the loudest statement is your silence. Care enough. When you choose not to engage in the noise, you elevate yourself above it. When you don't give people the response they expected, you maintain control over your emotions, your peace, and your positioning. Look at the life of those who've endured betrayal, attack, or misunderstanding. They weren't always vindicated by their words. Often they were vindicated by their fruit. They allowed their life, their consistency, care enough, and their outcomes to speak for them louder than any argument could. And that is what silence allows. Care enough, room for God to move on your behalf without your interference. You don't have to explain everything. You don't have to justify your process. And care enough, you don't have to convince people to understand you. When you are walking in alignment with your purpose, and you realize that the people who are meant to walk with you will silence correctly, and those who don't were never meant to carry your truth in the first place. Some of the strongest people are the quietest ones, the ones who don't need to prove anything. The ones who don't panic when misunderstood, enough and care enough. The ones who have learned to pause before reacting, pray before speaking, and reflect before responding. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Silence is also a builder. It's in the silence that foundations are laid, ideas are born, identities are shaped. Strength is cultivated. Care enough. God does his most powerful work in silence. Creation began in the silence. The Savior came through a silent virgin womb. Jesus himself often retreated into silence before stepping into the next dimension of his assignment, because silence forces us to sit with ourselves. Care enough. And for many, that's the hardest thing to do. It is easier to talk than to be still. It is easier to vent than to process. It is easier to react than to reflect. But none of those things lead to growth. They only lead to cycles, endless loops of drama, conflict, misunderstanding. Enough and care enough and wasted energy. If you truly want to evolve, if you truly want to grow into a version of yourself that's untouchable by petness, care enough, then you must fall in love with silence. You must learn to observe before you speak, to wait before you move, to discern before you respond. Share enough, because silence with you things noise never can. When you are quiet, you can hear the subtleties, the shifts, the signs. Care enough, you begin to notice the tone beneath the words, the motive behind the action, the pattern within the behavior. Care enough. That level of clarity can only come when you're not always trying to be the loudest voice in the room. Care enough. Some people talk so much they can't hear the warning signs. They speak so quickly they miss what's actually being said. But when you're silent and care enough, you get a new sense of awareness. You learn the room, you learn the people, you learn yourself. And then when you do speak, it carries weight. And care enough, because you didn't speak from pressure, you spoke from purpose. Your words aren't cheap, they're expensive, because they've been tested by time, filtered through wisdom, and backed by your actions. Care enough. Let people think your silence means you're weak. Let them underestimate you. Let them assume that because you didn't say anything you didn't notice. Care enough. There's no harm in being misjudged when your fruit speaks louder than their assumptions. Don't waste time proving who you are. Care enough. Invest that time, become who you're called to be. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you're preserving your energy. You're protecting your peace. Enough. You're giving God space to fight for you. And you're breaking the cycle that says you have to explain yourself to be validated. Care enough, because silence is not the absence of power. It is the reservation of it. It's knowing you could say something, but choosing not to. It's having a sword and keeping it sheathed. It's being fully aware and still choosing restraint. In silence, you create room for God to speak. Care enough for clarity to rise, for emotions to settle, for strategy to unfold. And when the time is right, because timing is everything, you will speak. And care enough, not from a place of panic, but from a place of power. So the next time you feel the urge to respond right away, to explain yourself, to prove your point, to speak just to be heard, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, is this the time? Is this the space? Is this the voice I want to echo through this moment? One of the most sacred things you will ever protect in life is your access to peace, to growth, to healing, to your process, to your becoming. Care enough, but here's the truth many of us learn the hard way. Not everyone deserves to walk with you through every room of your life. Care enough, just because someone is in proximity doesn't mean they've earned the right to intimacy. Just because they're around doesn't mean they should be allowed in. Access is a privilege, not a right. And when you don't discern who should have access, you will find yourself emotionally drained, spiritually compromised, and relationally exhausted. We are often so eager to connect, so desperate to be understood, so quick to call someone safe or friend, A family that we hand over parts of ourselves before we've truly tested the integrity of the person reaching for us. Care enough. We speak too soon, trust too quickly, invite too deeply. And when those people mishandle us, we wonder what went wrong. But the issue wasn't always their betrayal. Sometimes the issue was your lack of discernment. Not everyone who smiles is safe. Karen, not everyone who listens is loyal. Not everyone who claps is celebrating you. There are people who will study your weaknesses and care enough not to support you, but to use them when they feel threatened by your strength. That's why discernment is a gift you cannot afford to neglect. Care enough. It is the ability to see beyond the surface, to sense what's real, to notice what's hidden, to detect motive beneath words. And care enough. Discernment doesn't need evidence. It only needs permission. It's that quiet voice that says, be careful, slow down. Something's off. Care enough. And if you silence it for the sake of companionship, you will pay the price in heartbreak. When you are growing, healing, and care enough, becoming, you are in a vulnerable state. You are still forming. You are still learning. You are tender, exposed, and raw in certain areas. That is not the time to invite just anyone into your space. You don't bring strangers into a hospital room. You don't allow untrained hands to perform surgery. Then why would you allow just anyone to walk into your life while God is still operating on your soul? Discern who deserves access. That means asking the hard questions of, what does this person show me about their character? Are they consistent? Can they hold water, or do they leak? Do they listen with empathy, or do they collect my secrets like souvenirs? Care enough. Do they sharpen me or silently compete with me? These are the questions wisdom asks before you unlock the door of your heart. Because the wrong people care enough in the right place can create destruction. Just one toxic person in your inner circle can derail your confidence, poison your vision, distort your identity. Care enough and manipulate your decisions. Access is powerful. And when you give it to someone who is not spiritually, emotionally, and care enough or relationally mature enough to steward it, you end up bleeding from wounds they weren't equipped to bandage. Some people aren't bad. They're just not built for the level of intimacy you're inviting them into. They don't have the capacity. They don't have the spiritual weight. And that's okay. That doesn't mean they're evil. But it does mean you must limit their access. You can still love someone and keep your distance. You can still be kind and keep boundaries. You can still forgive and choose not to reopen the door. Care enough, boundaries are not walls built out of fear. They are gates managed by wisdom. You must know who belongs where. Not everyone is an inner court person. Some enough. Some are outer court. Some are passerby. Some are assignments, not companions. Some are for the moment, not the journey. Care enough. And that's not cruelty. That's clarity. Jesus himself had boundaries. He loved all, but he didn't walk closely with all. He had the multitudes, the 70, the 12, and then the 3. He gave different levels of access to different levels of trust. Care enough. If even the Son of God was intentional who he brought into certain moments, why do we think we can afford to be careless? Care enough. Some moments are too sacred to share with people who will treat them like entertainment. Some revelations are too divine to pour into ears that are more curious than compassionate. And some breakthroughs are too costly to let others trample over with careless words, insecure projections, or hidden jealousy. When God begins to elevate you emotionally, spiritually, mentally, he will start to expose who can handle the new you. And that exposure may come with disappointment. Some people you thought would celebrate your growth will resent your distance. Enough. Some you thought would grow with you will fight to keep you where they met you. Don't let guilt trick you into granting access to people who have already shown you they cannot carry you in this season. Care enough. This is not about arrogance. It's about alignment. Who you allow into your life determines your emotional climate. Enough. And your emotional climate influences your decisions. So if you're surrounded by people who drain you, distract you, or devalue you, don't be surprised when you begin to feel stagnant or insecure. Access is spiritual stewardship. You have to guard your gates. What you hear, what you see, and who you allow close. Because the wrong conversation at the wrong time can delay your healing. The wrong opinion can distort your vision. The wrong presence can interfere with your clarity. Start asking God to help you discern. Pray, Lord, show me who's sent and who slipped in. Reveal their fruit. Care enough. Test their motives. And give me the strength to release who I've outgrown, even if I love them. You were never meant to be accessible to everyone. Care enough. You are not a public park. You are holy ground. You are not a revolving door. You are a temple. And the more you realize your worth, the more selective you will become about who gets to experience your presence, your pain, and your progress. Love people. Respect them. Pray for them. Care enough. But be wise enough to know where they belong in your life. Some were only meant to walk you to the gate, not come inside. There is a sacred mystery in the way God moves. He doesn't always shout. He doesn't always announce himself with thunder and lightning. Often, God works in silence, in shadows, in hidden spaces, the places nobody sees, the moments nobody applauds, the seasons nobody understands. In a world obsessed with visibility, with platforms and applause, with highlights and recognition, we've been conditioned to believe that if it's not public, it's not powerful. But heaven doesn't operate by the systems of the world. God doesn't need the stage to do his deepest work. He needs a secret place. Some of the most life-altering, soul-renewing, and destiny-defining work God will ever do in your life will not happen in the spotlight. Care, and it will happen in the dark, in the hidden spaces where no one is watching and no one is cheering. And that is where true transformation begins. Consider the womb. It is dark, silent, hidden. Yet in that secret place, God is forming bones, wiring nervous systems, planting destiny into cells. A whole human is being created in a space where no eye can see. The womb doesn't need applause. It needs stillness. Growth in the womb is not rushed. It's sacred. It's timed. It's protected. Or think of a seed in the soil. When it's planted, it disappears from view. It looks like nothing is happening. The ground gives no announcement. There is no sign of progress. But under the surface, the seed is breaking open. Roots are reaching. Foundations are being laid. Care enough, and all of it happens in the dark. And yet, when we enter hidden seasons, seasons where no one's calling, no doors are opening, no platform is being built, we panic. We assume we're forgotten, overlooked, stuck. But you are not stuck. You are being prepared. Care enough, you are being formed. Hidden seasons are holy seasons. Sometimes God will intentionally hide you to protect you, not because you're not ready for the world, but because the world is not ready for what you carry. Exposure too soon can destroy what God is still building. He knows when to bring you into the light. But first, he wants to ensure you have depth. Care enough, and depth is developed in silence, not in the spotlight. Hiddenness is not punishment, it's preservation. It's where God separates you from distractions. Care enough, from outside noise, from other voices, so you can hear his voice more clearly. It's in the hidden space that heals old wounds, corrects toxic patterns. Care enough develops maturity and strengthens character. It's the cocoon before the wings, the wilderness before the promise, the preparation before the platform. Everyone wants to be seen, but few are willing to be shaped in the shadows. Everyone wants the crown, but few want the cave. But understand this, public anointing without private refining is dangerous. It's possible to arrive in front of people unready because you skipped the hidden work. Care enough. And what builds in the hidden space will be your foundation when you finally step into visibility. And care enough, he was anointed in private before he ever defeated Goliath in public. Before he held the throne, he was tending sheep. Forgotten by his family, but seen by God. It was in the fields alone, anonymous, that he developed the heart of a worshiper, the courage of a warrior, and the humility of a servant. Nobody saw it. Care enough, nobody clapped for it. But God was working in the hidden space. Think of Joseph, thrown in a pit, sold into slavery, locked in a prison, forgotten by but remembered by God. Care enough. His gift of interpreting dreams wasn't born in Pharaoh's palace. It was sharpened in the shadows of confinement. Care enough. The hidden places he suffered through were the very things that qualified him for leadership. God does his finest shaping in obscurity. And even Jesus, our perfect example, spent 30 years in silence before 3 years in ministry. He was the Son of God, yet he submitted to process. Care enough, he worked as a carpenter. He lived humbly. He learned obedience. Heaven knew who he was, but earth had to wait. Why? Because God works in the hidden spaces. He takes his time with destiny. If you're in a season where no one sees you, hear this clearly: you are not invisible to God. Care enough, he's doing something that may not be visible yet, but it's vital. He's building you slowly, deeply, and thoroughly, because what he has for you requires a strong foundation. Don't rush what God is trying to root. Care enough. Some of the most powerful growth happens without an audience. You don't need followers to develop fruit. You don't need applause to become anointed. Care enough. You don't need a platform to build character. What you need is patience. What you need is trust. What you need is to lean into the silence and let it shape you. Care enough, because eventually the hidden will be revealed. The quiet work will be seen. The time you spent praying when no one knew enough. The tears you cried when no one watched. The healing you pursued when no one clapped for you. It all becomes your strength when the light comes. And when God reveals, you won't just be seen. You'll be ready. Don't fight the hidden place. Don't despise the quiet season. Learn it. Grow in it. Heal in it. There is purpose in your private process. And when it feels like nothing is happening, remember, God is not absent in the silence. He is intentional. Care enough. You are not buried. You are being planted. And what is planted with God must eventually rise. Let him work behind the curtain. And care enough. Let him rebuild you where no one else can see. Because the God who formed you in the womb still does his greatest miracles in places no one else can reach. In a world where people are constantly encouraged to speak, react, and perform, those who master the art of observation are often misunderstood. Care enough. We live in a culture that prizes quick responses, instant opinions, and knee-jerk emotions. But when you learn to observe before you respond, care enough, pause before you proceed, and discern before you decide, you move differently. You operate in a higher realm of wisdom, clarity, and peace. Care enough. When you slow down long enough to watch people, not just what they say, but what they do, not just their intentions, but their patterns, you begin to gather truth. You begin to see with eyes sharpened by experience and filtered by discernment. You begin to notice the subtle shifts that most people miss, the tone behind the words, the body language that contradicts the smile, the silence that screams louder than any reply. Too many people get hurt not because the signs weren't there, but because they weren't paying attention. Care enough, they were too busy explaining, defending, or assuming. But observation slows you down enough to truly see. And what you see can save you. And care enough, it can keep you from making premature commitments, opening up to the wrong people, engaging in unnecessary arguments, or placing trust where it hasn't been earned. Observation is the gatekeeper of wisdom. It's the pause that allows your spirit to catch up with your emotions. It's the mental clarity that gives you space to consider the why behind the what. Instead of reacting to what someone did and care enough, you begin to look at what their actions reveal. And sometimes that revelation is enough to protect your peace without ever having to speak a word. Care enough. People show you who they are. The problem is we often talk over the evidence. We ignore the warning signs because we want the connection. Enough. We silence the inner alarm because we crave belonging. But the cost of ignoring what you observe is often higher than the temporary comfort of connection. Care enough. There is a deep wisdom in watching people without announcing that you're watching. When you observe silently, you give people the space to reveal themselves. You don't have to force exposure. Consistency will always expose character. What someone does repeatedly is a clearer picture than what they say passionately. This is why Jesus said, by their fruits you shall know them. Not by their eloquence, not by their charisma, not by how quickly they said, God told me, not by how well they impress you in one moment, but by the fruit of their life, their patterns, their history, and care enough, their integrity. You can't see fruit if you're always talking. You can't gather wisdom if you're always performing. You can't recognize deception if you're always rushing to be accepted. Sometimes you have to go quiet, step back, let the dust settle, and just watch. Observation will protect your peace. It will guard your heart. It will save your time, your energy, and your emotional bandwidth. Because once you learn to observe, you stop needing explanations for everything. You start accepting people as they are, not as they claim to be. We often give people roles in our lives based on potential instead of patterns. We hand over access because we want someone to fit because they've shown they belong. But when you operate from observation, you base decisions on what is, not what you hope for. You deal in reality, not fantasy. And that's how you stay safe from repeated cycles of disappointment. Even in conflict, observation is a shield. When you listen more than you speak, you begin to notice where the real issue lies. You start to hear what isn't being said. You recognize projection, manipulation, deflection, and care enough. You stop taking everything personally because you start seeing that some people's reactions have more to do with their wounds than your words. Enough observation protects you from becoming reactive. In a reactive world, being responsive instead of reactive is a form of power. You learn to hold your peace when others try to provoke you. You realize that not everything requires your comment. Not every insult needs a clapback. Care enough. Not every challenge needs your emotional investment. One of the greatest strengths of maturity is knowing when to say nothing. To see, to know. Care enough to understand, but to not act until the right time. That kind of restraint comes from deep internal peace and trust in God. Because when you know who you are, you don't have to fight every false narrative. You don't have to correct every misunderstanding. You don't have to rush to be seen, heard, or justified. You can sit in silence and let time tell the story. You can observe the landscape while others trip over their own noise. And when the time is right, care enough, when the moment requires your voice, you can speak with power, clarity, and conviction. Because your voice, lost in the noise, it was preserved in wisdom. Observation is also a mirror. When you observe others, you begin to observe yourself. You notice your triggers, your reactions, your assumptions. You begin to ask, what did that bother me? Why did I respond that way? You grow. You become self-aware, care enough, and that growth protects your future from the immaturity of your past. Some of you are exhausted not because your battles are too big, care enough, but because your observations are too shallow. You keep repeating the same relational patterns, career missteps, or spiritual mistakes because you haven't stopped long enough to observe what's going wrong. The art of observation is the beginning of discernment. And discernment is God's filter in a noisy, deceiving world. It doesn't come from reaction. It comes from reflection and care enough. And you can't reflect if you're always speaking, always posting, always defending. And care enough. There is a rare and powerful discipline that sets emotionally mature people apart, the ability to process internally before reacting externally. In a world obsessed with instant expression, public vulnerability, and rapid emotional feedback, we've lost the art of sitting with ourselves, care enough, at thinking through our experiences and letting them wisdom rise before words are spoken. We've conditioned to share too soon, to post too quickly, to speak before we've sat with the truth long enough to understand it. And in doing so, we often forfeit our power, reveal premature thoughts, and entangle others in our still developing emotions. But when you learn to process internally, to pause, reflect, and pray before you pour, you gain strength, care enough, and clarity and peace. Internal processing is not repression. It's not avoidance. It's not bottling things up and pretending you're fine. Care enough, contrary, it is spirit-led discipline that teaches you to steward your emotions with wisdom. It is the ability to feel deeply without reacting prematurely, to observe without responding immediately, care enough to sort through your inner world before exposing it to the outer one. Most people don't know how to sit with their own feelings. The moment they feel something uncomfortable, anger, sadness, jealousy, fear, they run to express it. They vent post-call or lash out. But true maturity learns to ask, what am I actually feeling? What's the root of this? Where is God in this moment? What does this emotion need? Silence, understanding, prayer, or confrontation. Not every emotion is meant to be externalized. Some emotions are invitations. Not to speak, but to seek. Care enough. They are alarms from your inner life that something deeper needs attention. But if you're too quick to speak, you won't discover what that something is. Care enough. You'll release frustration before discovering the wound. You'll share confusion before uncovering truth. Care enough. You'll talk it out before you've thought it through. When you master internal processing and care enough, you develop the ability to become your own sounding board through reflection journaling and especially through prayer. You don't run to the crowd. Care enough. You retreat to the quiet place. You sit with God. You sit with yourself. You allow the storm to settle before you try to explain the weather. You realize that processing in private leads to wisdom in public. There is a profound strength in knowing what you feel but not being ruled by it. Emotions are valid, but they are not final. They're not destiny. They are real, but not always right. And when you learn to process internally, care enough, you give your soul time to separate truth from trauma, faith from fear, conviction from impulse. This matters because your emotions shape your decisions. And your decisions shape your destiny. If you speak too soon, you may destroy a bridge. If you act too fast, you may step out of alignment. If you trust too easily, you may expose yourself to harm. But if you pause, if you reflect, if you allow God to speak into your emotions before you let others hear them, you move from chaos to clarity. Jesus modeled this beautifully. When he was tired and care enough, he withdrew. When he was grieving, he got alone. When he was troubled in the Garden of Gethsemane, he processed it with the Father before facing the crowd. Care enough. He didn't rush into response. He didn't avoid his emotions, but he took them to the right place. Some of us need to break the habit of emotional exposure. We've made everyone our therapist, everyone our safe place, everyone our outlet. And in doing so, care enough, we've not only drained ourselves, we've trained others to expect our cause before our clarity. Internal processing teaches you that not everyone deserves access to your unfiltered thoughts. Some things need to be wrestled through in prayer and not in public. It's also about learning to sit in emotional discomfort without trying to escape it. We are so quick to numb, distract, or discharge our feelings that we miss what they're trying to teach us. But the discomfort is a classroom. Internal processing is the posture that says, and care enough, I'm not going to run from this feeling. I'm going to listen to it, learn from it, and let God work through it before I react. This is especially important in relationships. When you don't process internally, you speak from your wounds instead of your wisdom.